Good evening and welcome. This is a regular meeting of the Princeton Planning Board on May 19th, 2022. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the amended resolution of regularly scheduled meetings of the Planning Board of Princeton for February 2022 through January 2023. A copy was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on January 7th, 2022. Legal notice on the adoption of said resolution was published in the January 14, 2022 edition of the Princeton Packet. Notice of this meeting also has been posted to the municipal website, princetonnj.gov/calendar. Pursuant to Executive Order 107, due to the ongoing state of emergency in New Jersey regarding COVID-19, notice that during the declared state of emergency, all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Planning Board will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet, Town Topics, and the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on April 8th, 2020, and again on January 6th, 2021. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. During hearings on applications for development, members of the public will have an opportunity to comment and ask questions. Public comment is heard by the board after an applicant's representatives have finished their presentations and have been questioned by planning board members and staff. Those wishing to comment orally should virtually raise your hand by clicking the little hand icon at the bottom of your screen, or if participating by phone, by pressing *9. Oral comments will be taken in the order in which hands were raised. We ask with respect that members of the public express your views in 3 minutes or less. Inappropriate public comment containing obscenity, hate speech, or relating to matters not before the board will be muted. And there is another paragraph here for when an ordinance referral is on the agenda, which it is tonight. So let me read that. The planning board also invites public comment on proposed ordinances referred to this board by Princeton's mayor and council for our assessment of the ordinance's consistency with the Princeton Community Master Plan. However, please be aware that the formal public hearing for all ordinances takes place before mayor and council at a council meeting, not before the planning board. So thanks for your patience as I got through all of that. Carrie, will you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Ms. Capizzoli? Here. Mr. Chow? Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Mr. McGowan? We can't hear you, Alvin.
The screen says you're not muted, but you are muted.
Yeah, that's odd.
Your mic is not working.
Okay, I'll continue with the roll call until that's resolved. Mr. O'Donnell?
Here.
Mr. Quinn?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Mr. Texarney?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Mr. Boddigheimer? Mrs. Wilson?
Here.
Mr. McGowan, you might want to try calling in. I mean, not calling in, or you could get out and rejoin us with your audio.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea, just unless you have a troubleshooting plan. Probably a good idea to leave the meeting and then rejoin with the same link, see if that works.
You might even want to reboot your computer, although that'll take a little longer.
Jim Purcell, your hand is raised.
Well, I was waiting for you to say that we're into announcements, but I wanted to be the first.
Okay, the first. Okay. Well, we are into announcements, so go right ahead.
I would like to introduce our new land use engineer, Daniel Weissman, who just joined us on Monday. He's joining us tonight for his first planning board meeting. And obviously he hasn't reviewed anything that's in front of the planning board yet, but he is off to a good start. And I was just informed by Carrie that without me knowing, he's already got his first planning board application to review. So Dan, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and giving a little tiny bit of background for the planning board.
Great, thank you for that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Weissman. Like Jim said, started on Monday. Graduated from college 2007 from Rowan University, degree in civil engineering. Spent the first 15 years of my career working in the heavy civil highway sector for a contractor, doing a lot of engineering work and construction. And then decided, after that amount of time, it was time for me to make a switch. And this opportunity came up, and I look very much forward to working with everybody in this community.
We accept your credentials. No, welcome.
Yes, welcome. We look forward to working with you too.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jim. Other announcements? Justin?
Sure. Just a brief update. As we said, we're going to give master plan updates pretty regularly at these meetings. Tomorrow's our first steering committee meeting. It'll be on Zoom. The public's welcome to attend, and that link is in the municipal calendar.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes. Mr.
Just
Quinn.
like to point out that the ad hoc committee that was studying the replacement for the former site plan review advisory board will be having a public hearing on May 26th. That's a Thursday, usual planning board time of 7 p.m. The purpose of the meeting is to hear public comment. We will review the process that we've gone through. We will not be making a report at that time. It's going to be mostly a listening session. So interested parties, we hope to get a letter into Town Topics announcing this as well. So again, it's the 26th at 7 p.m. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Maybe that can also be announced in the municipal newsletter. I don't know whether that's something to think about. I'm not.
I think it'll be helpful.
Okay. Next up, we have the happy task of recognizing our longtime fearless leader, Wanda Gunning. And we have a resolution that a few of us are going to take turns reading, and I will start us off. Whereas quality public service demands wisdom, energy, skill, patience, and commitment in advancing the public good. And whereas Wanda S. Gunning demonstrated all of these qualities and more as she served the Princeton community from 1985 to 2021 in the following capacities. Princeton Borough Historic Preservation Committee, 1985 to 1995. She was chair from 1987 to 1994. Princeton Township Historic Preservation Commission, 1987 and 88. There was an ad hoc commission, and then my understanding is that she wrote the ordinance to establish a permanent commission and then served on that commission from 1988 to 1996. Site Plan Review Advisory Board, 1987 to 1994. She chaired that board from 1991 to 1994. And the Regional Planning Board of Princeton and the Princeton Planning Board from 1998 to 2021. She was chair 1999 and 2000, 2004, 2005, and 2006, and 2010 through June of 2021. And she was vice chair in pretty much all the years that she was not chair. Tim? Tim, it's your turn. I'm finished with the with all of those years of service.
It looks like he's frozen.
Tim
Yeah.
might be frozen, so okay. I'm gonna jump in and read Tim's paragraph, which I'm sure is gonna break his heart because I know how strongly he feels about this. Whereas Mrs. Gunning's professionalism, common sense, and encyclopedic knowledge of Princeton history and neighborhoods earned her the respect and affection of staff, elected officials, and colleagues who worked with her over the decades.
And whereas Mrs. Gunning served as planning board chair, vice chair, landscape subcommittee chair, and member of the master plan committee, at all times pursuing a vision for Princeton as a vibrant, welcoming, diverse community that continues to grow and change, valuing architectural integrity and a human scale.
Whereas Mrs. Gunning's dedication to planning, design, and historic preservation, along with her insight into all things Princeton, informed her insightful approach to review of development applications and the establishment of policies for regional and community planning. And Mia.
Mia, you're on mute.
Sorry. Take two. Whereas Mrs. Gunning contributed to and advanced a wide range of goals, principles, and recommendations enumerated in all elements of the community master plan, helping to guide Princeton into the 21st century. And I think this is still me. Whereas Wanda's keen interest in the community, selfless commitment of time and skill, and steady leadership over many years benefited Princeton immeasurably.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Planning Board of Princeton expresses its sincere gratitude to Wanda S. Gunning for her extraordinary leadership and dedication over decades of service to the community, and extends all best wishes for the future. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to Mayor Mark Frieda and Princeton Council and the Princeton Historic Preservation Commission to recognize Wanda S. Gunning for this outstanding service she has provided to Princeton, New Jersey on this 19th day of May, 2022.
36 years is a really long time to come to meetings every month. And I can't even imagine the number of hours that she spent, not just at those meetings, but doing all that she did to prepare and follow up and lead the way on so many issues. And when she, serving with her, you could ask about any piece of property in town that was before us with an application attached to it, and she would know its history back to revolutionary times. It was really just extraordinary, and I miss her. I'm sure others do too. I'm sorry that she can't be with us tonight. She's just not a Zoomer anymore. And she's an incredibly humble person that does not like the limelight. As much time as she spent in public meetings, she does not like the limelight. So thank you all for reading what you read. I don't know whether anybody else has anything. Derek actually pointed out to me that he thinks that she began to serve before 1985 in a environmental design review commission or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen her name.
Couldn't find
Memos.
records associated with it, so it wasn't included, but
Big imprint.
yes,
What's
she
that?
probably started her service well before 1985. Jerry?
Yeah. Just as an example, and I'll be brief, during the Landwin application, there was a suggestion by opponents that there were structures of historic significance on the site. And I had a kind of a sidebar with Wanda, in which she said, there was a fire tower in that area, and fire towers were apparently built by the colonial forces during the Revolutionary War, and they would be lit if the British came out of New York, and it would show where they were going. And she explained, no, it wasn't on this side. It was across 206 on another side. But I thought, just that degree of detail is just amazing. But that was typical.
Classic, yes. Typical is right. Okay, well, thanks, everybody. Next up, we have minutes from September 9th. This was a regular meeting. Anybody, Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I'm prepared to move the minutes for acceptance.
I just wanted to mention that Mr. Muller sent to me an additional edit, 2 additional edits on page 2, pretty minor in detail, basically correcting my phraseology. Second paragraph, Mr. Laplace responded that in this area, there are a few single-family homes, but most of the properties are multifamily instead of. So thank you for those changes, Jerry.
You're welcome.
Good. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Capizzoli. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstaining? Okay. Discussions. We have an ordinance referral, ordinance 2022-14 on accessory structures and accessing, I think this means accessory dwelling unit definition modifications. Justin?
Yes, Madam Chair. I sent out a memo yesterday to all of the board members. Carrie, you have your hand up. Is that for this?
Yes, I just wanted to let one of the members of the public aware. He's very much involved with the second item, which has been carried. We didn't make a formal announcement that the Hunt School ordinance referral has been carried to our next meeting date of June 2nd.
Okay, thank you. That hopefully saves him some time. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I'll just give a brief summary of that memo on ordinance 2214, referred to the planning board by the municipal council to be heard at their meeting on Monday. It includes modifications to 2 definitions in the municipal code and some things regarding ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Beginning with the changes in the definition of attic and floor area, it's really in regards to how floor area is calculated. Under this proposed ordinance, if an attic is over 5 feet in height, its area is counted towards the proper the structure's floor area total, compared to 7 feet in height today, where it begins. So if the attic's under 5 feet in height, it won't be counted towards the floor area total. Another way to think about this is that 5 feet or less isn't really livable space, while you certainly could have a 6'11" attic that might just happen to be your bedroom too. Additionally, this proposed ordinance harmonizes the bulk requirements for accessory dwelling units between the former township and the former borough. That language is in that memo. I'm not going to go into all of it. On top of that, it creates a greater opportunities for affordable ADUs, allowing an increase in space from the 800 square feet that's allowed for a market rate ADU to 1,000 square feet. And the 3 habitable rooms that are allowed for a market rate ADU, while a designated affordable one would have the potential for 4 habitable rooms under this proposed ordinance. It also creates greater opportunities for handicapped accessible ADUs by allowing for an increase in 5% total maximum floor area for the property as a whole. So the 5% increase could be applied to the accessory dwelling unit or to the principal structure. On top of that, ADUs, if they choose not to have basements, will be allowed 100 square feet for mechanical equipment and utilities like washers and dryers, and an additional 48 square feet for a bicycle storage or other miscellaneous storage that wouldn't be accessed from the outside. Again, that's if they choose not to have a basement. And Councilman Cohen, do you have something you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted two really minor corrections or clarifications. One is that the attic definition, you're still allowed 1/3 of the floor area below as a credit, not counting towards floor area, but above that 1/3 of the floor area, if the height is 5 feet or more, it does count towards the floor area calculation. So I wanted to make sure that people knew we weren't getting rid of that 1/3 exemption. And then the other thing that I just wanted to clarify is that the bulk requirements that are in here are for all accessory structures, not just ADUs, but sheds and other garages and other accessory structures. So in your summary, you had said that they applied only to ADUs, but
Thank you for those clarifications.
sure.
The proposed ordinance also adds in a clause that accessory dwelling units can't be larger than the principal structure on the site. And staff finds that this proposed ordinance supports many of the goals of the Princeton Community Master Plan, including the housing element from not too long ago. It balances the need for new housing types and affordable housing opportunities with neighborhood character by modifying some of those codes that have been in place for these past 2 or so years. And that being said, I'll offer, I don't know if our zoning officer, Derek, wants to chime in on anything.
I'll be available for questions. You did a good job, Justin, and David made a couple minor corrections, but that's pretty much it. There's a lot of other standards that allow for setbacks. It kind of harmonizes the former borough and the township. Right now, the township has to be within the main building setbacks, and the new ADU setbacks provide, less setbacks to property line, but they also deal with the height of the structure to step it back towards the center of the lot. So we think it'll provide, even more opportunities for ADUs in town.
Mia, go ahead.
Excuse me, can you hear me?
We can, but when you have your, when we can hear you, it creates an echo. Are other people hearing that too?
Well, so am I. I don't know. Yeah.
It's because I believe it's because you have both your phone and your computer on. Is that possible?
No,
I'm seeing two
phone is off.
pictures of you.
My phone, I know.
I'm seeing two different angles of you now.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We're seeing you in stereo, Alvin.
Your
Okay,
left
now
side
one
is
of
your
them-
better side.
I don't know what to do.
Well, do you have a comment or a question right now?
No.
Well, I
Well,
would
you
say
can-
that unless you do, just keep yourself on mute. And then when you do, we'll just put up with the echo. How's that?
That's fine.
You can also mute the speaker on one of your devices.
It looks like he did that because I see
No, he's muting his microphone, not his speaker. He has to mute his speaker on one of the devices.
Try speaking now, Alvin. No.
Actually, I muted him. I'm sorry. And now I'm having problems unmuting it. Here we go.
No, he can unmute himself, but he has to turn the volume down or just mute the speaker on his computer or his iPhone or whatever he's logged in on one of them.
We cannot hear you right now, Alvin.
Okay, now we're back now. No problem.
Yeah. So just mute yourself unless you have a question or a comment, and then we'll deal with the echo when we need to. Is that okay?
That's fine with me.
Okay. Mia, did you have a comment or something to add?
Fortunately, I can still remember it, barely. I just want to say that the impetus for the changes to this, to the ADU ordinance stem from concern raised by Mr. Bridger, our zoning officer, and community residents, some of whom I think are in attendance, on the feeling that there was, that some of the ADUs that were being built after the initial ordinance was introduced were outsized and they were for sure larger than we than we had in mind. And we had promised when we passed the ordinance that we would continue to monitor how it was being utilized in the community and be open to making modifications over time to make sure that the original objectives of the ordinance were being achieved, which were primarily to create structures that would fill out the would expand as is so eloquently put in our master plan, the various tranches of our housing stock. So there was one loophole in our zoning code in particular related to attics that was being utilized in several of the structures that people had, residents had a particular objection to. And not just in ADUs, in as David pointed out, in houses as well. So this is the modification is to address that and hopefully ensure that the ADUs going forward are indeed lower in price, smaller in size, and really accessory to not in the duplex range, but truly accessory to the major structure. And I want to say we spent a lot of time talking about basements and finally decided that it was worth having basements. But given where we are with stormwater, we thought it worthwhile to encourage residents not to build basements if there was any chance that it could exacerbate the stormwater problems in their area. And so we wanted to create an alternative for those residents who didn't want or felt it was not helpful to create a basement. So that was the impetus for the bike storage and the small utility enclosure, because an ADU is so small, and if you don't have a basement, then where would you put your HVAC and washer dryer? So it's a very long-winded way of saying this addresses a number of concerns that have arisen since we first passed this.
Well, it is helpful, and that's what continuous improvement is all about, right? Are there other comments or questions before I invite public comment?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, I see. Sorry. Oh, and I see you now.
Okay, thank you. This may not be the appropriate forum for asking this, but do we have any idea how many ADUs have been constructed since the original ordinance was put in place? And how many of those have been restricted for low and moderate income occupancy? That was one of the main
I'll
reasons
answer the
for-
second thing twice, the second thing first. I don't think it's possible right now to restrict them to low mod, but they can be deed restricted for affordable, which is why there's the affordable provision in there. There are a number of local affordable housing nonprofits that wanted to be able to build ADUs and felt if they were going to build them, they wanted there to be 2 bedrooms. So if you are deed restricting it affordable, then you get a little bit more space, the 1,000 feet or 30%. But I don't think, because it's not, at least at this point, being submitted as part of a fair share, any, calculation. I don't know if anyone knows, but I don't know that you can restrict it to those categories, low or any of that. Derek, do you know?
I mean, somebody could, if they wanted to, they could restrict it and have it be a co-unit. Hopefully with some of the enhancements you mentioned, we'll get more activity. I've heard we've had some discussions with somebody that wants to do an affordable ADU, and it's a good opportunity. And it might be an opportunity, as David mentioned earlier, maybe, an older resident looking to get some additional income to stay in town longer might utilize part of their yard for an ADU to be used by a nonprofit, which would be a good way to, add to the housing stock in the variety of affordable housing that we have in town, which we've done an amazing amount over the last year and a half. So
The total number, Owen, is about 8, I think.
Okay,
that
Thank
either
you.
are in the pipeline or have already been built, maybe 9. I'm not totally up to date, but it's in that
okay.
range.
Thank you. And as of now, though, none of them have been designated as affordable.
No.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, I think the town would have the power actually to require that they all be affordable, even though they're not part of the fair share plan. They would just be credits that go into the next round. I don't even think you would need approval from the court, but I have no doubt that the court would easily grant it, and that the Fair Share Housing Center would, would consent to it. So that's just my opinion on that, and something that you might want to consider.
I will say that, Jerry, the objective of the ADUs was really to create missing middle income.
Okay.
And, we have right now hundreds of units that are designated as part of our settlement, but we have very little in that middle range, and as we talked about in passing the ordinance, we're increasingly bifurcated of people here who are at the high and people who are in subsidized housing. And the hope with the ADUs is to help people age in place, and also to help with that missing middle, which in Princeton, the middle is a little higher than the middle elsewhere, but it's still a very missing middle.
No, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
I know it happens that one of the 8 or 9 is right next to me, and it's quite the accessory dwelling unit is quite modest, and they're asking $465,000 for it.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot of what we're hoping around there. That we're hoping.
Oh, is that
for.
right? Okay.
Yes, which
I guess
is
only in Princeton would that be the missing.
Yes, it's almost non-existent.
Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Quinn.
Yeah, I just echo Councilwoman Sachs's comments and point out that those of us who are fortunate enough to own homes in Princeton, I'll speak for myself here. I receive postcards and mailings and calls on a weekly basis from people who want to buy my house, and some of them even live in town or say that they live in town. It would be ideal if we could find a way to match these people who have capital with people who are willing to create ADUs on their properties, especially people on fixed incomes. It would greatly add to our economic diversity. So again, to echo what Councilwoman Sachs said, this was about creating ownership opportunities or rental opportunities that were below market, significantly below market, but not as far below market as subsidized affordable housing.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, more articulately put than I did, Tim. Thank you.
No, not at all. But if there are any developers who are tuned in here, I would urge you to take a different approach rather than asking people to buy single family homes. Maybe a different approach would help. My home's not for sale. So.
And Louise, I had a question maybe for David and Mia and Justin, and I might be misunderstanding a provision, but it kind of popped out at me. On Justin's memo, and he's quoting from the ordinance, on page 3, there's a section on adjacent lots, and it says, in the case of adjacent lots, accessory structures constructed at the same time may be attached, located along a common lot line, and may have a common wall. Does that mean you could actually have four attached units, 2 single family units, 2 regular single family units, which are the bookends, and then the accessory units in the middle?
So the intent is you've got 2 lots. Each lot can have a primary dwelling, and each house could have, or each lot could have an accessory. Those accessory, all this is addressing is those accessory units could actually be 0 lot line units.
Okay.
And could be attached to each other, but they would still be one for each lot. So
Right. No, I understand that. I
Yeah.
mean, since they'll be attached to the primary unit, that's going to be 4 consecutive attached units, and it could be the scale could be quite significant. If am I understanding, David, or am I
No,
still?
no. I mean, these are in single family zones.
Right.
So I guess it's an interesting question, Jerry, whether the accessory unit could be attached to the primary unit and then also attached to an adjacent
Right.
accessory unit. I
Yeah.
don't think we had really thought about that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because it seems to me it's worth thinking a little bit more, because of if they could do that, and just reading it literally, that's the way I read it, you could have really a significant structure of 4 consecutive units that really will be out of character with the neighborhood.
Right. So just, to be aware, the primary unit cannot be within the setbacks.
Right.
Only the accessory units can go into the
Yeah.
setbacks, which means only the accessory units could take advantage of this. But I can imagine a scenario where what you're suggesting could result in in 4 dwelling units that are attached to each other.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions from board members? If not, I'll invite members of the public to offer comments if you have them. I see one hand raised. So Carrie, could you begin to bring over Dale Mead and Michael Floyd? So that we don't have a delay in between the two of them. And I would just ask again and remind our members of the public to please keep your comments to 3 minutes if you possibly can. Thanks.
And since this is not a formal hearing on an application, the witnesses do not have to be sworn in.
Okay. Mr. Mead, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I've lived at 48 Oakland Street for 48 years now. And during that period of time, we had a nice quiet neighborhood that has recently been tremendously disrupted by the construction of what's called in the neighborhood the white elephant monstrosity across the street at 35 Oakland. This is a very large 3-story main unit replacing a small 3-bedroom single story ranch, and plus an auxiliary dwelling unit that itself is 3 stories high. And the number of square feet looks like it exceeds 1,000 square feet easily. And neither of these are a step in the right direction. This is a further decrease in affordable housing in Princeton by the construction of these 2 units. You're replacing a $680,000 ranch home, and now you're going to have a main unit that's 1.7 million, and the ADU has not been appeared on the market yet, but I can imagine it's going to be over $1 million. So it's going the wrong direction in terms of affordable housing. Now, I think some of the things that you've done with this ordinance revision are a step in the right direction. I'm not sure it's enough yet to get this going in the direction that we had all hoped it would go, namely the creation of more affordable housing and in allowing seniors to stay longer in their homes in Princeton. The woman that formerly owned the house at 35 Oakland, she was essentially pushed out with extreme pressure from the developer and the executor of the estate while she was still living. I think was tempted by getting as much money as he could out of the lot. It just went in the wrong direction. What you're doing will help. I think more needs to be done. I remember when the ADU used to require that the owner lived in the main unit. I still think that's the way to make this all work the way it was originally intended. Now, apparently there's been some legal challenge to this by one of the people who benefited most from what we see at 35 Oakland, the architect that would design that building and those also at the corner of Gio and Linden. So from a legal point of view, I would like to see the town take another look at going back and seeing what could be done to restrict the occupancy of the main unit to be the owner, as opposed to allowing what's going on now. I intend to, Derek, I had action item on my list. I remember I filed an Oprah request for a listing of all of the units that have been approved for given construction permits for this new ADU ordinance. And I'm going to be looking at that some more now that I have more time. But I also intend to have a running log of whether we're improving or decreasing the affordable housing in Princeton. Each one of these lots, there's a lot of construction going on in town with demos. I'm going to be doing a running count to see whether this ordinance is actually increasing the stock of lower income housing, or it's mainly just increasing the profit margin of developers as they build bigger and bigger houses to the max on these lots. So,
Mr. Mead, I need to ask you to conclude. Have you
Yeah.
finished your comment?
I'm generally finished. It's the right step. I'm not sure it's enough.
Thank you for sharing that. Mr. Floyd.
Michael Floyd, Harris Road. Glad to see these changes. As you've monitored the development of ADUs, I've been, keeping an eye on this myself. I think the changes are very good and should accomplish at least some of what everybody hopes. I do wonder one thing. We've seen the ADUs that have been built or under construction, but how many developers or homeowners have benefited from this loophole that is going to be closed, that have completed applications or approvals? Meaning how many more of the loophole projects will we see?
You're asking how many are already in the pipeline?
Yes, either have completed applications or, yes, exactly.
Mr. Bridger, do you know the answer to that?
Yes, Madam Chair, I believe one unit's in the pipeline, and they could still file units until the law is actually, approved by council, if it is. Hopefully it is, so.
Okay, thank you. And my only other comment, and it's the same comment I had when this ordinance was originally considered, and I understand the purpose of it. Princeton market being what it is, the units produced will still likely miss most of the missing middle. And that's my last comment.
Thank you. Yep, thank you for that. I'm not seeing any other hands raised among attendees. This is a last call for public comment on this ordinance referral. Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Any other comments? Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond a little bit to Mr. Mead's concern by noting that the property on Oakland that he was referring to is significantly oversized property on that street. It's not a double lot in terms of the zoning, but it's just about a double lot in terms of the standard sized lots on the street, many of which are undersized for the zoning. So it's really, really tough for us to write zoning regulations that prevent outlier properties from being developed with outsized structures. So I just wanted to make that point, and I think that, if the ADU rule had not been put in place, the likelihood is that that existing structure would have been replaced by an even larger single-family structure if they didn't have the opportunity to do two separate structures there. So I understand the concerns. We're trying to address the concerns with this ordinance, but there is a limit to how much control we have when there are properties that are significantly different than other properties in the neighborhood.
Thanks for that, David. So I'm not seeing any other hands raised by board members. This is a consistency review, so we should make a finding of whether this is or is not consistent. Mr. Quinn?
I'll move that it's consistent with the master plan, which calls for a variety of housing stock at different price points, including missing middle housing.
Thank you for moving that, Mr. Quinn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Capizoli. Thank you.
And Tim, just if I can clarification, and your motion would include a recommendation to council that they adopt the ordinance.
Correct. Thank you, Jerry.
Yes, thank you. Moved and seconded. Carrie, let's have a roll call vote.
Ms. Capizoli,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we
Yes.
can.
There, one
With-
of me?
Only
With
one.
no echo, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to just state it like this. I'm going to give a qualified yes to it. I'm still thinking through this, and I'm not convinced that in the end, this ordinance of modifying the ADU is going to achieve what everyone seems to want it to achieve, particularly across middle income and you're doing those things. I'm going to assume that this won't be the last word on this particular ordinance. There'll be some, this is going to probably come up some other time again, and I can comment then. But again, for purposes of consistency, I will offer what I'm going to call a qualified yes on my part.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs,
Yes.
Mr. Texardi,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yes,
Motion carried.
thank you.
I'm
next
sorry,
on the-
did Phil not get called? I know that,
I didn't call him because he missed a good portion of the discussion, so,
I know he missed part of the meeting. I wasn't sure exactly when he came in. so.
yeah, 7:40, I believe.
Yeah, just 10 minutes ago.
Well, he wouldn't be eligible to vote anyway. There's 9 voting members.
Phil is a
Oh, is Phil a
member of the
regular member?
board. Yeah, he
Is
would
he a
have,
regular
he would have voted.
Yeah,
and
he's
Mrs.
regular.
He's not an alternate? Well,
He's not.
No,
then Jack would not be eligible.
Correct.
he would not have, but Phil is not because he has not heard the whole
Yeah,
discussion. So,
Okay.
so Mr. Taylor's vote is appropriate.
yep, sorry.
No worries. Okay, good. So the next item on the agenda, as Ms. Phillip announced earlier, the ordinance referral for Ordinance 2022-15 regarding the Hun School campus rezoning request. That referral is being carried to our June 2nd meeting. I hope that everybody heard that and that no one has been waiting all this time for that discussion, but it'll be carried to June 2nd. And my understanding is that there won't be any further notice or anything like that. Is that correct, Mr. Mueller? You're muted.
But we wouldn't be noticing for that meeting.
We
for the
wouldn't be
ordinance
noticing anyway,
referral.
right?
Right,
Okay. Thank you. One of these days I'll figure that out. Okay, so next up, we have a hearing from Simplify Living. This is a concept plan, an alternate plan regarding the property at 39 Linden Lane, block 33.03, lot 69. This is file number P 2221-007C. Mr. Dobromilsky, are you going to take the lead on this concept plan?
I'm not prepared to exactly. I think they're just submitting a sorry, I did not prepare a report for this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I know you did not prepare a report, and I'm sorry to have put you on the spot that way. We should probably then turn just to, unless our own staff have any comments on this, because I know the concept review typically, you know, obviously would not come to the board unless it had come already to staff. So if any staff want to weigh in before Mr. Kennedy, I'm not seeing any hands up. So go ahead, Ryan Kennedy, Esquire.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also want to thank Mr. Moeller and Carrie in particular. Ryan Kennedy from Stevens and Lee for Simplified Living. Interestingly, just from sitting through your other discussions, there's two things that you talked about tonight that I think are very relevant to this, what we'll call kind of alternate design that we're going to be talking about. First, this is a project over at 39 Linden Lane. It's a proposal for 3 units, all in the 1,300 square foot range. So close to that missing middle, perhaps type of housing stock that was discussed with your ADU discussion. And then second, I'm very eager, hopefully, to join Mr. Quinn and your ad hoc committee next week, because this applicant was the last to appear before SPRAB, and we're kind of in this interesting place where they filed a fully engineered and complete application. We went to SPRAB. We heard some good comments there and made some iterative changes to the plan. This is in one of the Tree Street neighborhoods, so we then went to HPC and got some at a courtesy review, got some good comments there, and essentially we're at the spot now where the applicant has made some directional changes based on those comments, but is kind of left without a place to go before the project is fully re-engineered and all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed. So I wanted to just thank Mr. Moeller and Carrie for kind of working with us to get here tonight so we can present this alternative and see, essentially if the way that we're tracking this project with the comments from SPRAB, with the comments from HPC, is a direction that we should be going with, not having a replacement of SPRAB to return back to at this point to see if we've done our homework essentially based on their comments. And obviously there's some members of this board that were representatives to SPRAB, and as well as Ms. Capizoli, obviously from HPC, with our courtesy review. So the idea here is we have our engineer and planner, Jim Kamalik, will walk through the original plan, the location here, the changes that we made after SPRAB that we showed to HPC, the comments we got from them, and then the changes made from there to, we think, improve the project and ultimately try to get as much feedback from you all as we can as we decide whether the direction that we're going is the right one. If the board likes the original thoughts or something in the middle, that's the idea of soliciting these comments. And again, I'll be there with perhaps some comments of my own next week as you continue to figure out what the replacement for SPRAB and this process for things like this will be going forward. I have some slides to show. I don't know that we really we could call them something, Jared. Mr. Muller, if you'd like to, should we say that they're marked? I don't know that that's. But for the record, I suppose, like we would with a regular application, I have one set of things to kind of scroll through.
Let's mark this as C1. That is concept one.
Excellent. And I know you guys are all familiar with Mr. Kamalik. He's a planner and civil engineer that's been working on this project before this board many times. And again, I'm not sure if it's necessary to for these purposes tonight in the interest of time, but I would like to introduce him and have him offered as an expert to the extent that's different from someone else talking here tonight. So Jim, if you want to unmute yourself and
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can just
Very
barely
quiet.
hear you, Jim.
How's that? A little better?
That's much better. Yes,
Night and
thank
day.
you.
James Kamalak, professional engineer and professional planner, Kensho Resources. Been practicing civil engineering for over 20 years and site planning as well. And I've been qualified before this board many, many times, you know, on other projects similar to this.
We accept your qualifications. Thanks.
thank you.
Thank you.
As we normally do, I'm going to spend a little bit less time than we normally would on this first part, but just to begin with, this is an applicant that's very environmentally conscious. This is going to be an extremely green development, electric only house, heat pumps, and achieving quite a few of the energy efficient milestones that you know, I think everyone would like to see, but this is an applicant that actually does that. And it's always a pleasure for me to be able to say that. But getting into the important things here with Jim, maybe we just want to orient the board to where we are neighborhood wise. Obviously, that's the 39 Linden outlined in blue there.
And Ryan and Jim, as you go through the slides are not marked by number, are they?
They most of the numbers are hidden, unfortunately, I think
Okay.
by my graphics. They are numbered, but on many of them we probably won't be able to see them because I wasn't artful in elevating that layer above it.
Okay. Whoever, whether it's you, Ryan, or Jim, if you could just identify the slide, that is by a very, very brief description. So if we ever need to, for the record, we could see what.
Okay.
Yes.
Absolutely. So Jim, this
Okay,
is
so you can
an
see-
aerial neighborhood photo if you want to.
Yeah, you can see on this aerial photo that we're on Linden Lane on the east side between Spruce and Nassau Street. And also you can see the overall outline of the blue of the property. It's about 180 feet deep and 50 feet wide. And that width you can also compare to the relative widths of the other lots, which is generally consistent. And also you can see the building footprints and the roof plans of the adjacent buildings within the neighborhood for reference. So on this lot, there's an existing Cape Cod style single family dwelling structure. And that would be replaced with what's being proposed here for this 3-unit building. So this is a closer view here of the second aerial slide. Looking at the frontage and the existing structure on 39 Linden Lane. You can see, the overall massing of the buildings on the adjacent lots, as well as some of the nature with some recessed detached garages in specific on the adjacent property, a detached garage and a barn structure, which is partially visible on the common property line, which is located at 33 Linden Lane near the adjacent driveway. And then this is an even closer view of the aerial. You can see the adjacent structures as well as 33 to the right, which also has some commercial element to it and is multifamily. And then you can see some of the massing of the other buildings there in the local neighborhood.
And Jim, as we get into this, particularly this corner of the neighborhood, there's from a neighborhood density perspective, many of the lots have been kind of cut up with a front back feature where there's a home or units kind of on a second lot behind a half-sized lot that fronts Linden.
Yeah, you'll occasionally find that in this neighborhood.
All right. I have a couple slides on the original site plan. You want to just very quickly talk
Sure.
about, and you know, I know that in the future slides show this better graphically, but we'll just quickly take us through the original submitted plan.
Sure. So on the left-hand side, we have Linden Lane. And then the frontage of the building there, the building is approximately on the order of 23 feet wide and approximately 80 feet long, with 3 separated units and a proposed driveway on what would be the northerly side adjacent to the existing single-family residence and their own driveway on the original plan between the property line and the proposed building. And then we've also provided an ordinance compliant from the attached dwelling standpoint of 3 parking stalls at the rear, with an open space area, which is in the lower right-hand corner of the lot in the backyard.
And this would be 3 units of approximately 1,300 square feet each. It's proposed.
Correct.
All right. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this, on the original plan. However, there are 2 ways of looking at this type of configuration. And we were guided by staff essentially to look at this as an attached dwellings, you know, which has a different zoning set in here versus multiple dwellings. But we have here both sets of zoning requirements on this. It makes a difference, I suppose, as to which one it is, but we'll you know, focus on the changes of the project here rather than you know, the specific details of the original plan. But ultimately, on the left has Jim, I believe, has the zoning bulk table. If you were to look at this as attached dwellings, kind of turned sideways, of course, or on the right has what the bulk requirements would be if these were multiple dwellings, and treating it as an apartment building. Jim, is that?
Yes, that's
correct.
That's correct. Yes, and from the multiple dwelling standpoint, we only had a few variances. You know, from the attached dwelling standpoint, they're more significant looking at it in that context.
So looking then, you know, getting to the heart of what the proposal is, Jim, you want to walk us through the front view? This was the original proposal fronting to Linden here where these steps are in the front.
Right, that was access to Unit A, and then the access driveway was to pass underneath the elevated decks on the left-hand side of the structure to the parking area at the rear. And then you can get a general sense of the facade treatments, you know, from this architect's plan. The rear unit was to be accessed from the rear facade, and the middle unit was proposed to be accessed from a walking path on the right-hand side of the structure, where there were entries into the basement level along the driveway. So that, I mean, this view here in particular, on the bottom, you can see that's the driveway side. And then we're looking at the front elevation with a canopy in the front door for the front unit. And some of these entries in terms of negotiating the topography with the revised concept addresses some of these particular, you know, layouts from the vertical standpoint of the building and the adjacent grade and the facade exposure, building massing and things like that. So this is a good sort of comparison as to where we're going with the modified concept.
Maybe not dwell too much here, but these are the floor plans that show the
and I think what's important, what might be important here is the originally proposed outdoor decks for each unit were proposed to come within 4 feet of the property line, so necessitating a side yard setback, and they were about 15 and 16 feet wide, depending what unit you were looking at in particular. And that's an element of the revised plan that was significantly reduced to pull that particular element away from the property line and create some increased buffer space.
Again, that's the second upper floor and a kind of a side profile showing this would be how a car would approach down the driveway from Linden Lane to the back.
Right. And I think, so the element there, there was some concern about, having to provide some protection on the vertical piers and posts for the elevated decks in and around the driveway, going underneath those decks. So with the revised design, that was an element that was pulled in closer to the building and addressed for comparison's sake.
So this next slide is a rendering from that front Linden corner. The one thing that perhaps you really can't see in this rendering is that currently that is kind of an impossible view because there's a privacy fence here along this property line, but it was kind of not rendered that way, so you could have an idea of the grade change and the placement of the driveway and generally the materials planned for the property. So we did, as I mentioned before, we had the I suppose honor. We were at the last ever SPRAD meeting, and we had a very healthy discussion with them, including some discussion about some things that are still being kind of grappled with as far as ADUs go. But several of the things that we heard, one, as shown on this slide, or at least talked about on this slide, was this is a neighborhood that has a lot of welcoming street activity, front porches. And we thought that was a great idea, and that's something that we incorporated based on those comments. Jim, I'll let you talk to this one, but the original design had used, well, Jim, I want to let you talk about these two, this change.
Right. So this change was to address the SPRAB comment. Again, we have the porch, expanded porch in the front. The gable was added to that, and then the footprint was expanded. We extended a more distinct walkway to the entrance on the side. And then in the rear, specifically, the largest change was to provide 3 stalls facing the rear property line with a turnaround area so that all the vehicles would be easily able to pull out of the driveway onto Linden Lane in a forward traffic movement instead of encouraging reverse movements. So this change addressed that. That was pretty significant in terms of the comments. So we expanded that area. That did increase the impervious coverage above the 49.5 to 52.5%, where previously the impervious coverage did comply. So relief would be necessary for that. But that particular element does play into, just keep in mind the revised concept. We made some modifications to that, still maintaining the back out ability and the forward movement ability as well.
So this comment from SPRAB, Jim, was essentially the original design had the occupants or the unit users backing out this driveway back to Linden. And there was a concern about navigating the piers, I suppose, from the deck
right.
features. And so by adding the turnaround area, that removed the need to navigate that and had a much simpler in and out operation.
Correct.
All right. The other next comment we had was this middle unit. The primary entrance in the original design was from the driveway side. We heard that perhaps another entrance or a way to get to the open space to the rear would be helpful. So that's something we accommodated as well. But then we got to the bigger comments. And Obviously there's some members of SPRAB here, but one of our takeaways was that looking up and down this street and this corner, that the number of units perhaps was appropriate. If you looked at the adjacent properties that had duplexes with units behind them, detached garages that were used for other purposes, or subdivided lots behind them with other units, that having the 3 units here perhaps was not inappropriate, but we heard that the site configuration perhaps wasn't necessarily what the board was feeling fit with the neighborhood entirely. So we looked at that and had those of you who were there that night, we had a really nice discussion, and some of the things went to looking at other types of properties on the street and thinking that duplicating those would make sense. Some of us kind of immediately went to, well, there's many duplexes on this street. Why couldn't you do a duplex with an ADU behind it? And I was listening quite astutely to the revisions that you guys were just talking about to the ADU ordinance. And while I think Mr. Muller's scenario with 0 lot line duplex and ADUs is an interesting one, it doesn't solve what we talked about with SPRAB, which is that 1, a 2-family cannot have an ADU. And then second, if we were to duplicate and going back a slide here to the neighborhood view, the types of arrangement with the front and back subdivided lots or a detached unit behind them, there's no way for this board to approve something like that. That would require a use variance to, once those units do not touch anymore, it is neither a multiple unit or a attached dwelling. And unfortunately, nothing in the code gives us an opportunity to match something kind of like what we see up and down the street. And that was one of the things we heard from SPRAB that we talked about and kind of noodled around how to deal with it. And unfortunately, while we're hoping to get some input from you on something like that, it is, I guess I caution everyone that, even if we were to hear that everyone on this board thought that was a perfect arrangement conceptually, we would have to go back to the zoning board, unfortunately. And this board, we couldn't return to this board for that type of arrangement because they're not touching. And that would be a use variance or D variance that this board couldn't hear. Because as I mentioned before, this is one of the tree streets, so it is a recommended district. So we did have a courtesy review before HPC and had a similar conversation with them and extracted as best we could as many of these comments from them to incorporate in this project. So what we took away from there was, 1, the perception of height for the project. It's hard from this photo to tell, but there is a significant existing grade drop right to left here that it was some thought exasperated by the site design, but maybe there were better ways to accommodate that grade with our project. The second was,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the grade drops. I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. Sorry. Right to left.
We'll have some upfront photos that kind of show that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's quite severe. And by having the driveway as we proposed on the left, while it didn't actually, some of the initial thoughts were, gosh, did you regrade the site that way, or did you cut it that way to make that happen? And actually not, but it does appear that way because of that grade drop. So maybe we recenter the property. Maybe we look at other ways for the driveway to handle that. There was the idea of trying to make it look more like the single family or duplex homes that are on the street. And we'll, later in our slideshow, we'll take you a little tour of that, but we made some changes, we think, to try to address that. The side porches or decks, we heard that kind of loud and clear, that having these really large outdoor spaces at the height that they were was not, the feedback we got was that was not something that HPC or what didn't come up as directly in SPRAB, but I think we heard that there too. So reworking that we felt was important. And then to look back at, currently there is a shared driveway. It's a deeded easement shared with the neighbor. We looked back at that. Is there a way to physically reuse that and take advantage of that? Again, if you're stepping back 2 slides to see the neighborhood to the left, there's kind of a shared, whether it's a private road or an actual road or a shared driveway, I'm not sure, but there's the concept of having another access there, or essentially a shared way of getting to those rear homes. And similarly, as you can see here, that historically and by deed easement, there's been a shared driveway with the current or the prior home at 39. Can we take advantage of that? Is there a way to use that and have less coverage? Is there a better site layout that happens from that? And then finally, the orientation of the front doors, particularly for the middle unit. There was some discussion and kind of concern that the front unit that fronts to Linden made sense. I think there was some thought that the rear unit that kind of is accessed from the backyard made some sense, but that middle unit, how does that relate to the rest of the project, to the neighborhood? So we put some thought into that. I'll lean on Jim here a little bit, but we've got some side by side, left being our kind of original site plan that we tweaked after SPRAB with the new driveway plan, and then what we're calling our alternative design here, which is the shared driveway version that we're going to be talking about tonight, and seeing what, if this is a design that this board thinks is worth us, that we should be advancing, and what other feedback we can get on it. So based on our visit with HPC at their courtesy review, this has a bunch of advantages. One, it's less coverage than even initially proposed. It does take advantage of and use the shared driveway. We feel that that's perhaps a benefit, not just for coverage, but these are very narrow lots here. It both allows a better site layout and a better understanding of or better relationship to what's there now. Jim, I think you can see here, but it shifts the building. Some of the comments that we initially got from staff was that the original configuration, while it was close to a driveway on the right side of the building, was close in terms of setbacks, and this arrangement allows the building to be more centered in the lot, which has a positive impact on the setbacks on both the left and the right side, and that would allow one of the units to be oriented, and as we'll show you in a minute, to the shared driveway, as actually the current house is now. This, interestingly, 39 Linden Lane is the one family that was there was turned sideways, oriented to that shared driveway. So the using the shared driveway would actually kind of allow Unit B to mimic that existing arrangement, and then the front unit have a more traditional front porch fronting the street, and the third unit addressing the back of the lot. And then finally, we heard that the decks, that was not something that people were used to seeing in Princeton. They were quite elevated, and based on both the topography that slips, that dips from right to left, as well as putting the driveway underneath required that they be a certain height. And we heard that loud and clear, that and took that off the chop. Jim, you want to maybe quickly take us through? This is our revised concept site plan.
Yeah, I guess starting at the left on Linden Lane, you can see that the porch still is proposed as being modified and expanded. And then there's a sort of a descending walk down to the street, which is similar to the context of other homes on Linden Lane. But really, as you look at the shared driveway, each of the units does have a pedestrian access and sort of embraces the driveway access more than it did previously, with the sidewalks getting to each unit. And then basically we have more open space and green area in the backyard and to the rear of the units where we've shifted the building more towards the center of the lot, where, it makes the smaller setbacks previously proposed less acute. I think it's 10 feet proposed from the side property line along the shared driveway. And then we have 15 feet at the rear of the property. Those decks where before they were 15 and 16 feet, they're actually reduced down to, I don't know what I call them, more open air balconies at 5 feet wide, just to give some air and outside space for a 5-foot width in the back of each of those units. So they're significantly reduced. And then we have the parking area at the rear where the parking spaces are facing the rear property line with the back out area, and using that access that exists adjacent to the garage and the barn that's currently there on 33 Linden Lane. So.
And Jim, so when you talk about attached units, there are some interesting requirements for open space and how those units kind of relate to their own, whether you want to call it a yard or usable outdoor space. And, does this design, I guess, by shifting the building here and allowing to have more of that space be kind of attached to the sides of the unit here, do we better comply with that? Is that more, I don't know, usable or accessible, I suppose, to the
well, currently it would be one contiguous area, and it does satisfy the minimum requirement of 1,800 square feet. So that requirement is met. The 20 foot in every direction is not necessarily met because we've reduced that side yard setback down to 15 feet in the back of these units there under the decks. And currently there is not an access from each of the units in terms of an egress door out to that rear area. Maybe that's something that could be considered from each of the units to that green space at the back. But, at this point in time, we did take a look at the grading. We feel like we can accomplish that as providing, that 1,800 square feet of open space. And this would be the most simplistic version of that.
So then I guess, looking from left to right here, left was the original design that had a driveway going under these large decks that were quite close and necessarily because of the topo, relating to the property next door being fairly tall. To the right, the revised, much smaller decks or porches or balconies, you want to call them. The creation of a true front porch for the front unit. We spent a lot of time we felt that let me see if I get this right, Jim. I want to say a shed. That's not the right word for the type of roof. This is a hip roof.
Yeah, that gable up on that front facade was reduced to a hip roof in the front, so that the architect added that element in order to reduce the overall perception of height and the building mass relative to what's visible of the front facade, which is more significantly reduced with the new design as compared to the gable roof on the front of the facade in the prior design.
Again, another view here showing the various. So again, the chopping down of the large decks from the left, the creation of a front porch for the front unit. We think scaling, that streetscape scaling down of the front unit to a more neighborhood scale with having that. See if I get it right again. Hip roof. I keep wanting to say shed. I should know better. And then here from the side profile as well, showing the areas where those changes were. And it was our understanding that this elevation because of the topography was the one that was the most difficult for HPC and SPRAB to wrap their heads around. And by removing the driveway, we were able to pull this scale down. There was no longer the need to have cars' length of clearance or height of clearance under this, and the grading was able to be much more I'll say, scaled or adjusted. We also, this is a crude attempt here, but to talk about that middle unit and how it addresses as a front entrance the shared driveway. So on the right was the existing home, the prior home there, that was interestingly, always kind of turned sideways and addressed that shared driveway. And by incorporating the shared driveway into the design, we were able to have a meaningful relationship of that middle unit to similar to the current house to get in there. The front unit would still front the street with the front porch. The middle unit would front the shared driveway, kind of like the red house at 39 Linden does here on the right. And then the back unit would address the rear of the lot. Jim, maybe we could, I'm sure.
Just 2 points on that. Both the front and the rear with this layout would still be pedestrian accessible from the rear parking stalls, which I think is important. And then, also additionally, I think when you look at this picture at the right of the Cape Cod, I spoke of it as a single family dwelling. I believe the tax records in the past do indicate that it was 2 units or, inhabited as a 2-family relative to those records. So, I think I was really focused on it as a single family. It's more of a traditional Cape Cod structure, but I just wanted to clarify that.
So with these changes, there are still variances needed. It is a tight lot, but Jim, if you want to just very quickly, kind of just list through the type of relief that we would need, and then maybe just relative to the other design, in general terms, maybe tick off which of the things we were able to kind of make go away by addressing these comments, coverage being the biggest one.
Right.
But,
yeah, so in terms of maximum impervious coverage, that was further reduced, beyond that SPRAD plan with the turnaround area down to 46%, which is well under the standard. The maximum building coverage was also reduced. I think previously that was at 30%, and that was reduced down to 27% and change. As I mentioned before, in terms of the setbacks, where before we had the smallest side yard setback down to 4 feet. And I think there might have been an interpretation by staff with an overhang of possibly 2 feet. Just with that interpretation, we're looking at, increasing that to 10 feet to the deck and 6.8 feet to the furthest extension of the building. So that's an appreciable increase. Would still need variance relief for that. Also the rear yard, where we're providing 15 feet, but measured to the edge of the deck, we're at 10 and 9 and 10 for all 3 units, where before we were at, I believe, 4 and 5 and 4. So that's almost doubled what was previously proposed, and we comply with the parking stalls, setbacks, etc. So, I think there's some improvements here relative to the comments, and interested to hear the feedback.
And just to talk about the, we have this split up into individual lots, but just want to be clear, this is not a subdivision. We, based on some prior applications, kind of superimposed, imaginary lot lines on each unit to kind of think about them as if they were. They will not be subdivided. That's not the application here. So the lot itself complies, for depth. But if you were to treat each unit somehow, being sideways, that's where we get these variances from.
Correct. Yeah, and then along those lines too, it would comply with the overall density of the lot, with the 9,000 square feet required and 9,100 provided.
So based on the feedback we got, this is as I think until Mr. Quinn's group is done with the 2.0 version of what SPRAB or whatever we'll place SPRAB will be. We did our best to listen to their feedback and HPC's feedback and put that into something that we think achieves the goals of both the applicant and what we hope that the town and the board are looking for. And with that feedback, we certainly get less coverage from our prior plan. Their comments, helped us get to an improved pedestrian access, shifting the building to the center of the lot, addressed the setbacks positively. We, again, by using the shared driveway, we're able to orient that unit similar to the existing house to that shared driveway in a way that we think makes a lot of sense. We removed those decks to something that perhaps is a more appropriate scale, both in height and size. And then, I guess we'll call mass mitigation, but, to make the front of this house, we think look like something you'd expect to see on the street. That meant changing to materials that are perhaps more commonly seen on the street. It meant adding the front porch. That means adjusting the front roof to revise the, let's say, visual impact, but to have it be more in keeping with the street, perhaps. And then the adjusting the siting of the building towards the center and the removal of that left driveway let us deal with the existing right to left drop topography in a way that we think is much more pleasant. It removes that feeling of height on the left side of the building, and it physically removes the height as well, because we're able to degrade the site in a way that kind of matches the existing topo largely, rather than needing to have enough vertical space to have a flat driveway along that line. So we're hoping that these changes are, and looking for feedback from this board to see if we're going in the right direction, if these are things that we should finish the engineering on and return to our existing application. Again, if this were a year ago, I would imagine that we would take this back to SPRAB and see what they thought of it. And maybe a year from now, we'll be taking, a different application would be taking it back to a different group for that kind of interim check. But I'm very appreciative of staff and Mr. Mueller to help us figure out a way to do this without having to re-engineer and finalize everything before we could get that feedback. One of the discussions with the whole SPRAB process had always been, well, to get to that initial feedback, you needed to have a complete application, full engineering, everything done. And by the time you got there, unfortunately, I think a lot of applicants would say, well, we've already spent all this money. It's not the best time to be having big conceptual changes. And similarly here, we appreciate the opportunity to make the changes conceptually to what we think gets us closer to what feedback we've received from your former advisory boards before needing to fully have a complete package. That obviously that takes a lot of time and money. And if it's not the direction that this board sees the project being appropriate for the project in the neighborhood, that's would be an unfortunate use of everyone's time and resources.
Yeah, so I think we understand what you're saying, Mr. Kennedy. Are we ready for the board members to pose questions and whatnot? Is there anything else that you have to present?
That's essentially it. We have a few more photos of representative homes on the street, but I think you've seen and heard what we'd like you to see about the iterations here.
Okay, I see. Mr. Cohen?
So I guess I'll give the good news first, which is I'm really happy that you decided to avail yourselves of the concept review. It's something that I wish more applicants would do. I think it's a good way to get feedback from the board. I'm also, you know, you clearly listened to a lot of the very specific concerns about the earlier application, but I think that I still have just a super serious reservation about this whole idea of attached dwellings that are oriented perpendicular to the street instead of parallel to the street. And, you know, I totally agree with staff. I mean, you look at the definition of attached dwelling in the ordinance, and there's no way that you can claim that this project is anything other than attached dwellings. They're single family units with party walls in between them. That's the definition in the code. That's what you've got here. So, you know, one of the problems I have is the whole way that you're measuring width and depth of the lots. The ordinance calls for each unit of the attached dwellings to sit on a lot that is minimum 20 foot wide for an interior unit, 40 foot wide for an end unit, 80 feet deep. When you look at the definitions in the code of how you measure lot depth or lot width, it's relative to the street. Lot width has to be measured perpendicular to the street line, parallel to the street line. Lot depth has to be measured perpendicular to the street line. So the way that you filled out your zone table does not conform with the definitions of the characteristics of a lot that's in our ordinance. And I would argue that you are actually, what you've got is 3 primary uses, 3 single family dwellings on a single lot that's 50 feet wide and 180 feet deep. And you're in a devariance for density because you've got 3 primary uses on a lot in a zone where more than one primary use is not permitted. So I know I'm getting kind of into the weeds, but the reason for going through all that, Ryan, is when you talk about having to go to the zoning board to get your nice duplex with an ADU in the back, I think you're in front of the zoning board no matter what, if you're going to stay with these attached dwellings. And I would just super strongly encourage you either to suck it up and go to the zoning board with a good application with a duplex in front and an ADU in the back, or do a multiple dwelling. You can get 3 units on this lot. It can be completely conforming to the zoning in this R4 zone if you just accept that you should be doing a multiple dwelling instead of attached dwellings. And I don't know if there's any reason why you're resisting, why your applicant is resisting going for multiple dwelling, other than they think that they can make more money selling attached dwellings. But, you know, financial reasons are not considered compelling hardship when you're looking for variances. So you didn't present any planning testimony tonight, but I don't see, you know, you've got a ton of variances. You've got no hardship. I just don't know why we're continuing to look at these attached dwellings that are oriented in a crazy anti-neighborhood way.
Thank you, David. Julie, and then Zenon.
Yeah, so first of all, I just appreciate the fact that Mr. Kennedy did come to HPC. I think it was productive. I completely agree with David, but I do think that having the opportunity to have a concept here at planning is actually really exciting and maybe something we can get used to, because a lot of productive conversation happens at this level. Like Ryan was saying, if they had engineered this whole thing, this might be a multiple hour battle and really difficult. And I just appreciate the idea that we're actually at a concept level right now. And back to David's point, I mean, when we saw this application, yeah, the decks were absolutely unacceptable. I mean, from a lot of different perspectives. And so, you know, I appreciate that they heard that, but we also had suggested breaking it up into two separate buildings. So, I mean, I do see improvements, and I do want to acknowledge that, because I do think this is a better approach than what we saw before. But I think, as David pointed out, there's multiple reasons why it still needs to be better.
If I could just very quickly, and just thank you both for that. And ultimately, I think both of you hit the nail on the head from the process perspective. David, you might have said, you know, suck it up and do it. I appreciate that your suggestion there, or the way you phrased it. But ultimately, we're, you know, not only, you know, there's no, you know, by coming back here to get this feedback, one is, you know, I agree with everyone. This is a very helpful opportunity to do this kind of in a truncated way, particularly because it's quite a leap of faith. You know, obviously the planning board is not advisory to the zoning board of adjustment, but feedback from, you know, we wouldn't have this opportunity for this type of feedback if we would have just withdrawn, re-engineered a new project, brought it before the zoning board, and perhaps heard similar or very different things from them. So you know, I just want to note, I guess an agreement with both of you, just from a process perspective, the importance of us, you know, having this opportunity to, you know, come SPRAB, HBC, and then here. Otherwise, you know, there's no, you know, there is not currently, and I don't think the MLUL allows it, a concept like process before zoning, unfortunately. So again, just appreciative of the feedback as we. I don't mean to stop it from coming. I'd like to encourage it to do more, but I just wanted to jump in there and say that how much I both appreciated that, and, you know, just kind of recognize the defects that we have fallen into in a process, and why we came back here, you know, knowing perhaps a lot of what you're saying.
Okay. Zenon, you had your hand up earlier. I guess you lowered it on purpose, or did you lower it by mistake?
No, I lowered it on purpose. I feel like I didn't really have my thoughts fully fleshed out, so I decided to lower it.
Okay. Other members of the board have any further? Mr. Taylor?
Yeah.
You were unmuted, but now you muted.
All right.
There you go.
I'm sorry. May I just ask a practical question? What I found particularly useful in this presentation is the ability to look down on the property, to truly see the dimensions of the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood, because for me, it made compellingly more logical Mr. Cohen's argument that multiple dwellings make sense. I hadn't seen that distinction in my initial review from a different perspective. And so my question is simply, obviously a multiple dwelling structure was an option when this process began. Why was an attached, or why is an attached dwelling more appealing, if I may ask, than a multiple, unless the answer is simply bottom line financial?
I'll try there, because I think there's a nuance. There's two layers, I think, to Mr. Cohen's comment. Because one, even as an even as a multiple dwelling, which is your, you know, I mean, if you think of attached as townhomes and multiple dwellings as an apartment building, there is not, unfortunately, the way to separate those units physically, so that the idea of a duplex in front and a third unit behind it, if they are not physically attached, is a devariance for multiple uses. So, you know, again, like Mr. Cohen said, that's 3 or 2 uses on one lot, and that's just there's no way to do that with that under the current zoning. So when we talk about looking at it as a multiple unit, I guess we could have designed an apartment building, perhaps, where, you know, there's a unit on top of the other, and then technically that would have been a multiple unit, with a different set of zoning requirements, but ultimately it would not have allowed us to have that, if I'll call it neighborhood matching, or, you know, that 2 in the front and a small thing in the back, for example. That there's no way to do that and duplicate what the rest of the street, perhaps not the rest, you know, what we see a little bit further down Linden without a D variance. So yes, one could have configured, I think, a multiple dwelling building here with 3 units. And if they had been stacked in some way, or a common entrance with a interior makeup of 3 units like you might see elsewhere in Princeton, that would count and get us into that category of zoning, but it wouldn't allow us to do that front and back piece. So I just want, I wanted to say that the appealing piece of those ideas of having the accessibility to, you know, open space around you, or privacy, or the things that you might get from that, we couldn't do. You know, we looked at designs that were kind of, Jim and I called these, like, you know, Tetrising, where, you know, you've got kind of units wrapping around each other top and bottom, where there wasn't just that up and down party wall. And you probably could do something like that technically complied and was a multiple dwelling from the code perspective, but it wouldn't have gotten you that front back separation that, you know, if you wanted to look at it as a duplex with an ADU, unfortunately that's not an option, or 2 physically separate buildings with different units in them. That also is a use variance, unfortunately.
Mr. Quinn.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies if this came up. I've been having connection problems tonight, so I've been kicked out and reconnected a couple of times. We're understanding that this is not fully engineered at this point, this concept. Do you have an idea of how many variances would be required with the concept as it stands prior to engineering? I mean, I know you're not going to get an exact number, but sort of a ballpark number of variances required with this concept?
We can, and, you know, we while it's not fully engineered, we did, you know, do that math, and I'll say, as I often have the luxury of doing, I do agree with Mr. Cohen in his interpretation of the way of looking at the ordinance. And if, when we give you this number, when I have Jim go through them, it is using the different, you know, using that kind of sideways idea that we're not looking at the lot front to back for depth. We're looking at the unit kind of turned sideways, and, you know, instead of the depth being the full depth of lot, it's that sideways thing, and that's where these variances come from. So we calculated it that way, you know, based on just the way I guess these similar applications have been done. I happily treat it differently and have less variances. I'll just say that because I do kind of follow David's logic there. But Jim, maybe want to go quickly through. I mean, there's no coverage, no floor area, or parking. It's rear yard, lot depth, and individual lot area per unit are the 3 categories of variances. And all 3 of them kind of are functions of that, I don't want to say artificial construct, because I think it probably is the only one to use, but of looking at the, you know, as if these were individual lots turned sideways that need to have their individual size and individual depth that is really the width.
So
Jim, did I get that right?
Yeah, I think previously, just to round out the numbers on the original plan and the attached dwelling scenario, there were 11 variances. And this revised concept is, although some of them are reduced in magnitude, there's actually 1 more. And that's because one of the units open space dropped below the 600 square foot threshold if you looked at it individually. So there would actually be 1 more variance, but in terms of the overall context of what the variances are, as I mentioned before, several of them would be reduced significantly, especially the side yard setbacks in terms of magnitude. But on the order of the quote unquote number of variances, they would largely be the same.
So
I-
it's a
I had-
dozen.
I had counted them, the ones that were asterisked on their zoning chart, and the asterisk meant that a variance was necessary. And I came up with 15. And I know Mr. Purcell came up with a number, and Derek is trying to be heard. So I'll defer
Yeah.
to Derek.
Derek, go ahead.
There's a couple additional variants. I mean, staff struggled with this layout on the first case. It doesn't fit. It's a square peg in a round hole. This only works with this type of zoning when you face a street, as David says. That's how everything was designed. The open space works when you have a 20-foot wide lot and you have a 25-foot rear yard setback as a minimum. You're almost at the open space that's required for that unit, and you comply with the 20-foot minimum dimension of the lot. So, I mean, this is an attached dwelling. A multifamily could be put on this lot with a lot less variances. And that's something that I think should be considered, or a large single family and an ADU or a duplex. But there's a certain point when you have this many variances, does the zoning mean anything? It's irrelevant almost. It's an issue. Do we want to go down this rabbit hole further? And that concerns me. And I just want to say, Dan, we never said to get the memo. That's on me. I just got sidetracked with other things. So I just want to put that out there. But the number of variances is a concern. And this will be, you say everyone says there's no precedence, but if I'm a builder, hey, look, it just happened on a 50-foot wide lot. Maybe we can do it in another, not that it's a bad design. If it was a wider lot, it might work, but it's just, there are options that do work. So maybe that's a direction that needs to be followed, or a D variance, but that's, fraught with peril at the zoning board, because their job is to really look at the code and find special reasons to allow a deviation from that. So, and I'm sure that you guys have a great team, a great attorney and a planner and engineer, and I'm sure you come up with something, but those are some of staff's concerns. And I don't know if Jim wants to, I see his hands up as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. That was really helpful. Jim?
Well, I don't need to repeat. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't need to repeat anything that Derek said because we both agree. I do have a fundamental question though. I've heard a lot of discussion about the character of the neighborhood and the fact that there are multiple units on many of these lots. How many units are at next door at 33 Linden? Do you know, Jim?
I believe there's at least 4. That's my understanding, but I don't have an exact number that's in that building.
So there are multiple units already using what you're terming a shared driveway. And you're adding 3 more units under residential site improvement standards. That's no longer defined as a shared driveway. It must be a street. So how do you plan on getting around that regulation, that standard? It can't be called a shared driveway, and it must meet residential site improvement standards for a neighborhood street. That's a fundamental flaw in the concept.
No, thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Mr. Cohen?
I just want to ask Jim Purcell for clarification. So even if this were a multiple dwelling, which we've just been saying could be fit onto this property without hardly any variances, if they wanted to use the shared driveway, that same RSIS.
The RSIS standard defines a shared driveway as serving between 1 and 4 and no more than 4 units. So adding these street.
So even for a multi.
It could be a private street, but it has to meet the standards of a street, which is a certain width of cartway, and this shared driveway does not meet that.
Sorry, David, I talked over you.
No. That's, I finished my question and I think Jim answered it. No matter whether it's attached dwellings or a multiple dwelling, if there are 3 units on this lot, unless they have their own separate driveway, it's going to throw them into that conflict situation with RSIS.
So it might not be worth going into this right now, given all of the other reservations slash serious critiques that have been offered up, all of which I agree with for what that's worth. But at some point, it would be good to know maybe what that RSIS standard is. I would assume it's not like a 2-lane street necessarily, and it is a 2-lane street. All right, so never mind that. Ms. Sachs.
I have 2 questions, one for David and one for the applicant. So the applicant could be thinking while David answers. My question for the applicant is, we still haven't gotten an answer to why, given all of these challenges to doing it as 3 attached, the applicant was still so set on doing it in what seems to be a much more difficult configuration. It really does seem to be swimming upstream, and I haven't yet heard of a benefit. So I'll let you think about that, but it would be great to get a real answer for that, if there is one. And David, what did you have in terms of having, if you were designing this, how would you, how did you envision those units being laid out?
So as a 3-unit multiple dwelling,
yeah,
I mean, the thing that would make the most sense would be side by side on the first floor, and then a 3rd unit on the 2nd floor that could be reached, and that it would be a single front entry, and you could go right or left or upstairs to the upstairs unit. That's the way that's what I would start from.
And that's allowed under the current zoning?
Absolutely.
Sounds like a great idea.
It would, one of the reasons that would require, oddly, the parking requirements for multiple versus attached are different. So as a multiple, you would be required to have 5 parking spaces. As an attached, it's 3. And that numbers predate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that puts you in D territory, though, right? That's
no, it does not. And
yeah.
But that was one of the reasons, and that in site layout, frankly, were some of the reasons that went towards this design initially. That, and frankly, unfortunately, the kind of inertia of or momentum of process that you have to really go with one thing and get an engineered it in before you get, was really only, unfortunately, at SPRAD that we started really able to get some feedback there. But that was largely it. Initially the thought was to ask for a parking variance from the 3 to 5 if we couldn't fit 5 back there, or the need to have more coverage back there. It seemed that this maybe worked better. We're obviously hearing something different tonight, but that was one of the factors.
I just say, like, it seems odd to be trying to steer clear of one relatively easy variance, and then you end up with a ton of more difficult variances. Also, I mean, in terms of support from any of our land use bodies or the neighborhood or the community, of course, in where this is located, we're trying to move towards, a more walkable, encouraging a more walkable lifestyle. So it just doesn't seem like, I think people would be excited to approve something that just has 3 cars as opposed to 5 cars. Whereas some of these other variances that you're, like these balconies and all that, that's the residents clearly our neighbors are not excited by that. Anyway, did you want to say one more thing? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, I was just saying that is helpful. And I, we know there's always a sensitivity for parking, and that feedback is frankly very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so not seeing any other hands from board members for further comments or questions. I do see that there are a couple of attendees who would like to speak. I'd remind you that we have a 3-minute time frame, and I guess I should ask Justin or Carrie, do we have our timer available tonight? The little timer function? If so, I think that's really helpful. Okay.
Yes, I could get it working.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so Carrie, have you moved? Yes, I see you've moved 2 folks over. There's one more hand raised after that. And I would just say to the public now, if you're going to want to speak, go ahead and raise your hand so we have a sense of how many folks are lined up.
Just to be fair, the first person I moved over was Lisa Marcus Levine.
Okay. Ms. Levine?
Hi.
Hi, can you activate your camera, please?
Yes. There we go.
So, Mr. Miller, since this is a concept review, are you wanting to swear in folks who have things to say?
No, I don't think it's necessary.
Okay. Go right ahead, Ms. Levine.
Okay, thanks. I may go a little over 3 minutes because I practiced, but now with the changes that people have talked about, I have to alter a little bit.
Talk fast, do your best.
Okay. So I am a member of the Environmental Commission, but my comments here tonight are strictly as a resident of Linden Lane. The concept plan is preferable to the original proposal. It's great they negotiated to maintain the shared driveway. To me, that's a big improvement. Now, of course, Jim has pointed out this problem with that. I have a question, could that be grandfathered in, just like the warehouse for Reading is, a grandfathered use at 33 Linden. Neither proposal is appropriate for the site, the original or the concept. In my mind, the configuration of the single structure with 3 units sitting perpendicular to the street is not in context with the neighborhood. Lot area for unit B, which they state is more than 1,000 square feet under the minimum lot size, tells you that another layout would better fit within this residential zone. Sprab suggested the main building, possibly a duplex fronting Linden with smaller in the rear. That would certainly be more in context with the neighborhood, a single family dwelling with duplexes. And again, this idea of you could have a duplex and then a studio on top, just some other configuration. So altering that configuration would possibly save 1 or more of the grand old trees. These trees are a very important part of the natural stormwater management on this site. As shade trees, they cool and clean the air, and they provide habitat for birds, insects, and other animals. It would also allow each unit to have at least 3 open sides, providing more sunlight and natural ventilation to all units, and it would negate the need for balconies which overlook the neighboring property. If layout is endorsed by the board in this conceptual plan, there are still changes that should be considered. Revisions have been made to the front facade to make it more compatible with the look of the single family homes on the street, but more needs to be done.
Ms. Levine, I'm sorry to interrupt and talk over you, but could you lift your paper up off of your, I think your paper is interfering with your
sound
speaker or something?
Yeah. Sorry. Revisions have been made to the front facade to make it more compatible with the look of the single family homes on the street. More needs to be done. The balcony on unit A should be eliminated. It's flush with the front of the house, basically becoming part of the front facade. The open balcony and solid privacy panel are unsightly from the street. The residents of that unit have a front porch, which is usable open space for them. And it could also be, the balcony could, or the front porch could be extended across the front of the building to extend their open space. All balconies, the rails and supporting posts should be finished. They appear to be unfinished exterior grade lumber in the drawings. And also trellis type privacy panels would be better than the solid panels that are shown in the drawings. Covered secure bike parking should be provided for at least 6 bikes on a street that is overrun with parked cars. Prioritizing bike commuting is key. Any landscape plans should include green infrastructure to help mitigate storm runoff, a particular concern for the neighbors downslope from the property, and maintaining mature trees on the property would certainly help with that. And I hope you've all had a chance to visit the site. You can't appreciate the majesty of the trees, particularly the oak tree at the center of the lot without a visit. It's important for you to know exactly what will be lost if they cut down the large caliper trees as proposed. Remember, our home did exist on this site and they can build without having to take down so many trees. Your decision on this application is crucial to our neighborhood. This is not a homeowner who appreciates the neighborhood and is hoping to improve their property for their own enjoyment and yes, profit. Simplify Living is a company coming to develop a property purely for profit. As the application stands, the profit motive is taking priority over the best interests of the neighborhood. They can do better for the environment, for the neighbors, and for the residents who will create their homes at 39 Linden Lane. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And thanks for all the time you spend on PEC. I know it's time well spent. Thank you. Ms. Thoft.
Yes, hi. I have two comments. I'll try to be quick. Thank you to everyone on the planning board, because I feel like you've hit the nail on the head on this application. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are representing us because we've had a lot of discussions neighbor to neighbor, and it feels like you share our concerns. So just two comments. Well, I'll just reiterate what David said and Julie said, that basically I also think the typology of this proposed project doesn't make any sense in the context of the neighborhood because of the orientation of the lot. I mean, we all know what the front of the lot is and what the side of the lot is. And I feel a little like Alice in Wonderland here, having it rotated. I don't get it. I mean, we know what the street is. So I think hopefully we all agree that that this is not in context with the neighborhood, doesn't have much of a relationship to the other buildings and to the street, and the typology of the 3 units sideways on the lot, it doesn't exist certainly anywhere in the neighborhood, and I don't think it exists anywhere in town. It feels a little like a suburban development concept kind of that is in our zoning, but hasn't actually been enacted anywhere except maybe on Humbert Street, but that was a corner lot. So I would argue that that is different. And then my other point is just in terms of being I'm 2 doors down from the proposed project. I'm downhill. And I know from building my house 9 years ago that we are on bedrock here, about 6 feet down, because there's a quarry behind us, or a former quarry. And I actually had to jackhammer down about a foot to get my house to sit where it needed to sit. And so it's essentially a bathtub here. And all the water runs down the hill underneath my house. I pump it out. And I have a concern that's keeping me a little awake at night of what happens when we increase the impervious coverage up the hill. Where does the water go? Because I know it doesn't percolate. So I'm hopeful that the Jim Kemelak, who I work with myself, is a great engineer, and our engineering department can work together to make sure that things don't get worse for us downhill. But I do have a concern about that. And I'm early. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So I think we have up next
Lars Heaton. Yes.
Can I just say I had recent surgery?
Oh, okay.
Can you
I'm
hear me?
sorry.
I had recent surgery on my nose. I'm just gonna. It's not too bad, but I want you to see me if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
So you can. It's just I have some stitches there. Don't be afraid.
Okay.
Okay. So I live on 26. I'm the owner together with my wife Megan. 26 Linden Lane, and I wanted to just explain to the board and especially to Mr. Kennedy, Mr. Chimelak, if I pronounce that correctly, give you a sense of the reaction from somebody who lives here. It's a historic area, it's a special street. And what confused me when we got the letter with the first letter of the plans was that the central issue to me is that it's the attractiveness of this neighborhood. And the attractiveness of the properties, the values of the properties, and the attractiveness of the neighborhood depends on the character of the neighborhood. And ultimately, that's what's going to place the value on this development, right? That's the profit that the developer is looking for. And what's so strange when I opened this letter was I saw the 11 variances, and I'm thinking, here's somebody who wants to take advantage or take advantage of the character of this neighborhood by breaking the rules of the neighborhood. It didn't make sense to me, because it seems like if you move into a neighborhood, you have to actually contribute to this neighborhood as opposed to taking from it. And so, Mr. Kennedy and Mr. Schimmelek, I just want you to understand that it seemed to me that there was no thinking or really deep thought about what it meant to live here and what makes this neighborhood special. So I was quite troubled by that. And then let me just say then today that, yeah, I heard, there's some changes here and so on, but Mr. Kennedy and Schimmelek, I just can't help. I'm not entirely convinced here, because there were several things that were presented here that I felt they were kind of, you say that there, you said very quickly with this photo that, there are other structures like that. There is no attached structure like this on the street, period. You say 3 attached units make sense, you said, given, and you kind of, went, there are other problems, but this is not a problem. And yeah, I think it is. From my perspective, it is, and it should be a concern of somebody who wants to build and contribute to this neighborhood. That's another red flag. And the fact that kind of you tried to redefine the type of housing in the beginning, that, there are less variances here, more here, sent the same message to me. And I think that the test of this in my mind is the words that actually came from the presentation. You correctly said, this is a narrow lot. This is a tight lot. Several times you said that. And that, of course, the problem then is to not overdevelop it when it comes to community standards. And doing a trick kind of if you need the area, so you have to, in order to shrink, so the balconies didn't make sense. They don't make sense. In order to shrink them, you need to move the driving, to the shared driving. That just seems to me, again, kind of a sleight of hand. It doesn't change that this is an effort to really overdevelop it, and that's why zoning laws are there. And the last thing I'll say is that I understand that you spent a lot of time on this, and you said, you don't want the time to be wasted. You have already put it in, and there's probably people have been paid, but it seems to me that that's kind of the wrong argument there, that you have to understand the community first. Otherwise, anytime you put in will be wasted or will be not efficiently used. So
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hedden. I hate to cut you off.
yeah, that's
is there
okay.
anything?
I totally understand. I was at the end there anyway, and too many words.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
did I pronounce your name correctly? Is it Hedden or he?
It's Hedden.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
it's Hedden. Thank you.
Maybe for future reference.
That's okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for
Yes,
listening.
thank you. Thanks for taking the time. I'm not seeing any other hands up. Last call for members of the public to raise your hands and have a chance to speak. Okay, seeing none, I'll close public comment. I just want to say quickly, I am glad that Ms. Levine brought up the trees, because one of the things, and I understand it's not a central issue given all these other things that have been raised. And I'll say again, I agree with everything that David said, and I agree with what Julie said. But on a lot like this, with at least 2 big trees, one of which was cut down early on, a great big tree in the front of the lot was removed very early on, and a big tree toward the back of the lot has been damaged by, I don't know what, a backhoe or something. And the plan would call for basically a complete clear cutting of the lot, which is just, a real shame. And I hope that we don't keep seeing applications that require clear cutting. And I also wanted to say Ms. Thoft invoked Humbert. I was not wild about that plan either, but at least it was sideways facing toward other dwellings that were also sideways facing on that little, side road that sort of acted like a driveway. And this is not like that at all. This is, completely different. So that's my perspective. Any other? Yeah, Jerry?
Yeah, if I can say something about that tree in the front. When there was first a comment on that, and that might have been by Tim previously, I can talk to Jim and Derek about that, and they sent out the municipal arborist just to check that. And what he reported back was that was not removed by the developer. It was actually removed by the town as.
Oh, you know what? That's ringing a bell. I think I was supposed to know that already. I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay,
Jerry.
so with apologies then, Mr. Kennedy and your clients. Ms. Sachs? And then Mr.
Sorry.
Ken.
I meant to lower my hand. That was my question about why that tree had been removed. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah. Tim?
It actually had to do with some improvements that were being made to the right of way.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is a question for Jerry. The sheer number of variances that are being asked for, can the board take that into consideration? Now, we're not being asked. This is a concept review, so I know that, and I really do appreciate the applicant presenting a concept review. I wish that we heard more of these before they were fully baked. But we're talking by some counts somewhere between a dozen to 15 variances that are being requested. So absent this, including this application and other applications that come before this board, the sheer number of variances, can that factor into our consideration, our thinking about whether we would approve an application? I know I'm asking a bit of an abstract question in the context of a concrete, concept plan.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Tim. And my office actually is, Martina did some research on that to see if we could find any cases dealing with it, and we did not. But here's my thinking on that. It's not simply there's a lot of variances. We know for each variance, the applicant has to satisfy the negative criteria, one of which is that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, right? And one could easily conceive, and I think analytically a board should do this when there's a lot of variances, even if they make a decision that there's no substantial detriment to the public good with respect to any one variance. When you add that all up, does that change from no substantial detriment and now looking at the detriment from all of them to substantial detriment looked at collectively? And I think a board could do that. So the answer is yes, I think the board could look at it, but I think that would be the analytical framework. Is a negative, is the detriment from all of them substantial?
Thank you, Jerry, and thanks for understanding. I know that my question was a bit circuitous, but
it was a really good one.
Your
Yeah,
answer was exactly
it was
what I
hypothetical,
was.
but yeah, but it was right on point, I thought.
I mean, I know I want to acknowledge that I was asking a hypothetical in the context of what we've just heard, which is not hypothetical.
Right.
Right. Okay, are there any other comments that folks want to make? And if not, Mr. Kennedy, any closing thoughts?
Just again, the point of these types of exercises is maybe not exactly what happened tonight, but ultimately to get this type of feedback from the board, and I'm very appreciative of that, particularly Jerry and Carrie. This is kind of a new thing to do this and not have another advisory board to go back to. So I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to have this type of discussion, and from all of the feedback that we've gotten first from SPRAB, from HBC, and now from you guys directly. And the only thing to do with those is to take that information and apply it to what we're doing into a better project. So again, very appreciative of this opportunity and process. And I'm looking, you can't tell from directionally because the boxes all get configured for everyone's screen, but I'm looking at Mr. Quinn and thinking about your exercise for what's going to replace SPRAB, and you know, again, appreciative of this night and that type of concept and back and forth that we can have. So again, thank you all for your time here tonight.
We look forward to you joining us, Mr. Kennedy, on the 26th. So, and Mr. O'Donnell has his hand up, Madam
Yes,
Chair.
I see that. Hi, Owen. You're on mute.
Thank you. And I was just going to say to Mr. Kennedy and the applicants team, thank you, because this has helped us as a member of the ad hoc committee, along with Tim and Julie and Alvin, who are looking at this. I think tonight was a very interesting exercise for us, at least, and possibly determining how we're going to move forward with this. So thank you for coming to us with this concept.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Then I think we're done with that discussion, and we can cut you loose. Or no, I see David, your hand is up. I was about to cut.
I was just going to move to adjourn, Louise.
That's great. You know, when I start really hemming and hawing, it's time to move. That we adjourn.
I will second
right.
Councilman Cohen's
moved and
motion.
seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Nobody is opposed or abstaining. Thank you, everybody. Really was a good discussion. Thanks, Mr. Kennedy.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.
Good night, everybody.